started 2 books at the start of this vlog, one of which I'm not very far into at all. It's The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I am only 40 pages in, so look at that. Look at all those pages left to read. But it's a really intriguing start. It claims to be about 2 strangers who find themselves connected by a vast and mysterious library containing many wonders and still more secrets. So far, it's been very cruel and violent and sad start, which isn't surprising for a Mark Lawrence book. I haven't read a ton of his books, but it's not surprising for a Mark Lawrence start. Something really interesting that got introduced here in these early chapters is the mechanism. So the mechanism is this thing where you can read a book and the mechanism will bring that book to life. So as you're reading it, it will build the world around you so that you're physically interactive in this world. And that sounds like a reader's dream. My first thought is, well, maybe I don't want that for every book that I read, because 1, I wouldn't want it for this book, for the way this book started. I don't want to be in that world. But 2, even for like really wonderful, whimsical, magical, beautiful worlds that I would like to get lost in, would I really want that in the moment that I'm reading it? Like, imagine reading The Lord of the Rings for the first time and then you're in the Shire. You would start reading, you'd be in the Shire, the Shire would be physically built around you, and then you'd put the book down and you'd go explore the Shire, which sounds awesome, but then you'd never read the book. There's a lot more to this mechanism, and I'm sure I'm going to be learning a lot more about it as well, but it does sound pretty amazing for going to explore after you've read the book. You've got the plot. You're done with that now. And now you just want to go hang out in the Shire. That'd be pretty alright. Anyway, that's not that. I'm sure the mechanism is very important for this book, but that's just, I doubt that's what the whole book is about. It's just something that I found interesting. I've also started an audiobook, The House with Good Bones. So this is following a girl, Samantha, who goes to visit her mother because she's an entomologist, I think is what it was called. She studies bugs and she goes on dig sites, so like an archaeologist for bugs. Her dig site got delayed, so now she's hanging out with her mom, and very quickly she realizes that her mom is not acting right. She's not herself. She's developed mannerisms and ideals more matching her grandmother, Grandmay, who was not a nice lady, and everything seems wrong. So one thing that I'm really enjoying about this book so far is the fact that Samantha is a very down-to-earth person. So everything that happens to her, she's logically thinking it through, and she's like, okay, that didn't happen. This sort of thing, this isn't real. And usually when something that seems impossible happens, it is impossible. So let's think this through, let's think through all the possibilities, and let's sort this one out logically. And she'll look at her experience as a scientist and she'll say, okay, in this situation, I experienced something that seemed impossible. I then gained more information and learned how it was possible. It was not aliens, so it's all gonna be okay. This is gonna be okay too. So I like that. I like following a character with this sort of very logical view of the world encountering supernatural things. So it's like she tries to logic her way through it, but it's supernatural, so you kind of can't. So that's a really fun juxtaposition that this book kind of has us in. I also really like her dynamic with her mom. There's a lot of side characters, not a lot. There's a few other side characters introduced that are all very strong, like just really strong character work in this book. All that said, I'm really not very interested in anything that's happening. There have been a couple of good scenes. There have been a couple scenes that have been like, oh, all right, yeah, let's go there. But for the most part, I feel like this is a very well-written book that I'm just not really that interested in. I don't really know how to describe it other than that. I don't dislike it by any means. I feel like I could stop listening to this and I would be fine. Wouldn't bother my day. Or I could keep listening to it and I would be fine. Be a good day still. So I just kind of feel like I'm reading this, and that's how I feel about this book. It's just that I'm reading it. Other than Samantha. Samantha stands out as just a fantastic protagonist, but yeah, just not really invested in anything. So I'm gonna keep reading that. I'm gonna keep reading this, and I will check in with you soon. Welcome to the vlog. House with Good Bones. I kind of still feel in the middle about it, so I would classify this as a cozy horror. You know how there are cozy mysteries, cozy fantasy has become a buzzword in the last couple of years. If you're looking for a cozy horror, cozy gothic horror, this'll scratch that itch. It's well written, it's funny, it's fun, it has great character work. I just don't think cozy is my subgenre. I don't think it's my word. I think almost always when I read a cozy fill-in genre here, I come away saying, I liked it. It was good. It's not anything more than like a 3.5 for me. Although I will say the second half of The House with Good Bones, way better than the first half. The first half is a very slow build, which I'm used to with my gothic horror books. It's a very slow build. Not a lot really happens other than just kind of laying groundwork, and then the second half really takes off. And I think that in general this is a very well written book. It's a really good book, and I think that a lot of people will enjoy it and have enjoyed it. It's a really fun horror, if that makes sense, with some really great scenes, a really strong ending. I just don't think cozy is my classification, my type of story. So I'm not mad that I read it. I had a good time for the most part. I just never really was fully into it. I was talking to Angela about it though, and she was saying that it was very campy, it was really fun, she just had a great time with it, and she was able to just have a good time with it. So it's a good time. I just tend to not connect with this style. I'm also still reading The Book That Wouldn't Burn. I'm now at the halfway point, which is 277 pages. Yeah, that's halfway. This book in total is 560 pages. So 559, I rounded up. So my initial reactions to the first few pages of The Book That Wouldn't Burn in the last vlog clip were a terrible representation of what this book would end up being. Yes, there is a really brutal start because one of our two perspectives, Lavera, she is on the outskirts of this city. She's a duster. She lives in the dust. They have this settlement that's on the outskirts, and that is very dangerous. There's a lot of threats to them. And this begins where the story begins with her being kind of discontent, and she wants to make it to the city, and then something happens that upsets everything and puts her in very brutal situation, which eventually does lead her to the city as well and into opportunities, but it's not a brutal book. So I've read by Mark Lawrence, I've read the Red Sister trilogy, and I've read nothing else by him. And I didn't really like Red Sister very much, but I did enjoy the sequels more, though at the end of the day, the trilogy didn't do a lot for me. But this is a totally different vibe. This is a totally different tone. I already like it much more than that trilogy. This is not grimdark, or at least it hasn't been up to this point. So I don't want to mislead you with calling the beginning a bit brutal, because it really was just the inciting incident for her story. Not to say that there's no risk and but it's just, I just don't want to give the wrong impression. We also have a second perspective, and I don't know how I would pronounce his name now that I have to say it out loud. I'm gonna go with Evar. So Evar is in a very different situation than her. He has been trapped in this area for a long time. And the mechanism that I was talking about, ironically, I left out probably the most important component about it. I was so focused on thinking about it from the perspective of a reader that I left out the factor that in the course of using this mechanism, sometimes children that are using it disappear. And they get spit back out, but they get spit back out years and years later, and they haven't aged, and their mind has been altered, their memories, how much information? I'll just leave it at that. So like that's really important. The ironic piece of me neglecting that information in favor of viewing this as a reader is that this is a bad thing, right? One would think that people would stop using the mechanism because children disappear in it and then they come back changed, but also unchanged when they should be changed. You would think that that would make people not use it, but the benefits as a reader of using the mechanism means that they kind of weigh the risk and decide it's worth it and use it anyway, which is so funny because I read about this mechanism and then I wanted to talk to you about it from the perspective of a reader and not talk to you about the consequences of using it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What this book is it's an endless library, and we get to do a lot of exploring within it. There are library keepers, there are creatures that are inside of it. There's risks, there's mysteries. It doesn't, time and space don't work within the library like you and I might be familiar with them working. It gives me strong Piranesi vibes, an ever-changing house, a mysterious house, a living, breathing, moving house, as well as, except this is a library, as well as it gives me vibes of the Lost Library in Avatar: The Last Airbender. The plot of this is different from both of those things, but just as far as overall feel, this book I would categorize similarly to those two things, which I love. I love labyrinth-esque things. It makes me so happy. I tend to hate time travel, but time being wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, it being not functioning the same way as I understand it to function in my life. I love that, and I love the way it's done in this book. The core of this book, the driving force of this book, is a mystery. So it is kind of hard to talk about in any kind of specific detail other than that. So my plan was to start this book, since it's 550 pages. My plan was to start this book this week and then finish it next week, but since the story is so dependent on a mystery, I think it would be pretty unsatisfying for you for me to talk about it that way, because I can't really talk about it too in depth beyond what I've done. So what I'm gonna do now that I've finished my audiobook is I'm gonna see if I can get this on audiobook, and I will give it my full attention. I'll listen to it on audiobook as well as read it in physical, just depending on what I can do in the moment, and I'm gonna try to see if I can finish this week. I have been told that the ending is very explosive. It's very fast paced. There's a lot going on at the end. So I think I can do it. If I can't, I won't. Like, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm gonna try. That way I can give you a satisfying conclusion to if it all kind of comes together. I will say that I have a couple of theories. Because this is such a themes-focused book so far, there's a lot of themes being introduced. I have theories based off of the themes. So we'll see if my theories are correct. We'll see. I won't tell you anything other than if it all feels satisfying in the end. I've also been reading Spy Family, so we can talk about that in the next clip too. It's raining, but hopefully you can hear me over the rain. I did it! I completed the book. So this is a book that spends a lot of time, or that Mark Lawrence seemed to have spent a lot of time and attention in making it a very woven story. So there are epigraphs, I think they're called, at the beginning of each chapter, some of which are quotes by Mark Lawrence. At the beginning of each chapter, there's a quote, and the quotes kind of, what they say, what they're telling, weave into the themes of the story, and the themes of the story weave into the plot of the story. So it feels like a really, really intentional book. The book focuses a lot on knowledge and on keepers of knowledge, focuses a lot on the power and the impact of knowledge, as well as the manipulation of it, the power that having knowledge gives, and the desire of some to withhold some of those things in order to maintain power, in order to manipulate perspectives. There's a lot of focus on memory and on the importance of memory and how that shapes us. A lot of significance on the value of books and what they keep and how important they are in our lives. With the plot being so tightly tied to the themes, that means that if you are a themes reader, like I am, then there are certain plot reveals that I think, I'll speak for myself. There's certain plot reveals that I guess pretty early on, because you can I could look at the themes and say, okay, so that probably means that this is where the plot's going, which I don't think is a bad thing by any count. But there were certain reveals that I called, other reveals that took me by surprise, some things that I felt came together really, really well, other things that I'm kind of holding out judgment until the next book. I will be reading the next book whenever it's released. I'm really curious to see where Mark Lawrence takes all this. Also, in editing, I realized that I never talked about any of the animal companions. There are many animals in this story as well. Overall, I think this is a really well written book, a really, really interesting story, something that feels familiar but also really different. I have many questions about where he's going with this, but definitely enjoyed myself reading this one. It was an interesting one. I think it was a good mix of intrigue and mystery and slow moving world building and idea unraveling, coupled with big explosive moments, which made the pacing feel weird sometimes, but overall I think it worked pretty well. It was a little bit repetitive. There were certain ideas or things that repeated themselves a few times. The rain's picking up. Let me move on. Overall, I enjoyed this. I'm holding out full judgment until book 2 because there's a couple of things that I want to see what he does with them, but this was a very good book. I also read Spy Family, so I had like almost 3 full volumes left to read since the last time I checked in with the series. So before I start Monster, I wanted to pop back in with Spy Family. Moving you closer to me because the rain's getting loud, but it's also loud in my house. So hopefully this will just work out. So I had almost 3 full volumes to read in Spy Family, and it felt so good to be back. Oh, I missed this ridiculous humor. I missed the over-the-top faces. I missed the silly characters, and some interesting things are happening. We had an attack that Anya got to really shine in. We had some interesting family dynamics go on, and where we are right now in this last chapter that I just read, which was 81, we're building up to some interesting things. So I'm done now. I'm going to switch to Monster, and then after I read all of Monster, I'll come back and catch up on what chapters were published while I was reading Monster. But oh my goodness, it's building up to something that I'm very curious to see. I mean, are we about to do the thing where the 2 characters are about to realize that they're on opposite sides? Are we about to do that thing? Anyway, wonderful to be back to Spy Family. I'm always happy to be back in the series. It's so good. The author does such a good job of hitting the humor and the really emotional beats just so well. And I had a lot of concern last week when I said I was going to start Dragon Ball, and people being like, why would you do that? Don't do that. Okay, so let me just real quick clarify. The reason I'm doing Dragon Ball is because it's really important for manga in general. It was so influential for so many series that I've been reading, and I like to read series like that. I like to read series that kind of shape a whole genre. And Dragon Ball is one of those things. I do the same thing with the fantasy genre, with the sci-fi genre. It's just something I like doing. So, y'all, it's cool. Like, it's alright. I'm not expecting it to be a new favorite. I just want to read something that was influential for the genre. There was also a lot of comments about, why aren't you reading Naruto? That is really high on my list. I am going to read Naruto. I'm going to start Naruto within the next few months. So, like, it's cool. I just like reading a variety of things. It may take me a little bit of time to get to certain things. It's all gonna be fine. Anyway, the rain's too loud. I hope you enjoyed this vlog. I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday on this channel, Mondays and Fridays on the other channel, which is always linked in the description of my videos. I'll see you again soon. Bye.